Thank you. I'm Pat Jensen with the League of Women Voters, and I'm going to be moderating this section on for the candidates for county attorney for Johnson County. I'm not going to go through the whole routine again of what we're going to do, but they will get an opening of 5 minutes because there's only 2 of them. And then we will go to a question from the league and then questions from all of you. And then they will have 2 minutes for wrap up at the end. So we will immediately get started, and if you want to get cards, if you need cards, just kind of signal for these gals over here. Okay? All right, we'll start with opening statements, and I guess I'll start with Janet.
Can you hear me okay? I'm never sure about these microphones. So, I'm Janet Linus. I'm running for re-election as Johnson County Attorney. Just to tell you a little bit about myself, I moved here in 1977 to go to college, and I'm one of those people who has never left. After finishing my undergrad degree, I worked for about 4 or 5 years, including working for a political campaign, working for the National Organization for Women, working at Psych Hospital, and then working at a halfway house, and then decided to go back to law school as I was referring a lot of people I was talking to talk to an attorney, and thought, well, maybe it was time I actually became an attorney myself. After graduating from law school, I had a clerkship for a year and then came back and started working in the Johnson County Attorney's Office in 1990. I prosecuted primarily victim crimes and violent crimes for about the first 7 or 8 years in the office, and then switched over to start to do the civil work for the county, which involved everything from dealing with collective bargaining issues, employment issues, purchasing land for conservation. I drafted the first human rights ordinance for Johnson County, I guess first and only human rights ordinance for Johnson County, dealt with all kinds of contracts and other issues for the county. When Pat White retired as county attorney, I was encouraged to run. And I think that had a lot to do with what I had been doing before I even joined the county attorney's office, as well as what I had done in the county attorney's office. While I was still an undergrad, I got involved, and I know some of you still from this campaign working on the Equal Rights Amendment and the Iowa Equal Rights Amendment. I got very involved in different kind of activities for social justice. I worked a lot with different programs that worked with victims of crime even before going to law school. So I worked with the Domestic Violence Intervention Program, I worked with the Crisis Center. I also worked as an advocate, or volunteered as an advocate with the Rape Victim Advocacy Program. It was through that work that when I graduated from law school and finished my clerkship, I was happy to go back and work in the county attorney's office, primarily focusing on prosecuting victim crimes. As county attorney, it's been a very rewarding experience, really, because I've been able to do both the criminal work as well as the civil work for the county. It's a very important job being county attorney. I'm the chief legal advisor for the county, so I deal with everything from, again, making sure our contracts are fair, making sure we're enforcing the federal and state laws, overseeing the prosecution of about 4,000 criminal cases a year. I prosecute some of the cases myself and oversee the prosecution by others within my office. I manage a budget of almost $3 million, actually 4 budgets that total to about $4 million, and supervise a staff of about 35, and that includes 13 experienced attorneys. Some of the things I've done also as county attorney, though, is look at kind of what are the needs within the criminal justice system. And that includes everything from looking at how can we deal with substance abuse and mental health issues in the criminal justice system, to arrange and try to avoid having people stay in the criminal justice system or try to get them out of the criminal justice system and not return. So started things such as the drug treatment court, worked on the marijuana, developed the first, and I think at this point, only marijuana diversion program in the state of Iowa. Also adopted the family treatment court for families which had their children removed because of substance abuse problems in the home. Developed the driving under suspension court, where we're getting people to pay off fines so they can get their driver's license back and legally drive. Worked with the disproportionate minority contact so we can try to decrease the disparity in the criminal justice system, which is a nationwide problem as well as here in Johnson County. Well, we're looking at implementing some new programs, and I'm excited about looking at a 3rd term as county attorney so I can expand those programs that we have already started, that I've started for diversion programs, looking at mental health, dealing with the diversity within the criminal justice system, and trying to deal with decreasing the disproportionate minority contact within the criminal justice system, but also providing some other programs to deal with such things as restorative justice. On the civil aspect of the county attorney's office, I want to make sure that the board of supervisors and all the county departments are getting good legal advice, that we continue to work with all the different departments, including conservation, so we can purchase more land for trails, recreation, keep our water safe, making sure that we're enforcing the laws. Some of the things I'm working on now include looking at the community ID and trying to figure out a way to implement that within the county, and looking at building coalitions really to make sure that the county is working well with other entities and making sure we're doing all we can to protect our citizens as well. I've been happy to be on the U of I Anti-Violence Coalition for several years. I've started several programs while in the county attorney's office dealing with these, including the sexual assault investigation team and the sexual assault response team, and I want to make sure that those are strong entities, strong groups. So I thank the League for having this forum and giving us an opportunity to let you learn more about the job of county attorney, about me, about what the job entails. I want to also thank my family who's in the background, including my husband John, who teaches at the College of Education, and my daughter who's a sophomore at City High. So thank you for having us.
Thank you, Janet. John, your turn.
Thank you to the League of Women Voters, to all of you here, and to County Attorney Linus for this forum. So my name is John Zimmerman, and I am running to bring a balanced sense of justice to the Johnson County criminal justice system, because right now, the way it functions hurts a lot of real people unnecessarily by focusing limited resources in the wrong places. Now, police officers are an important part of the criminal justice system. They are trained as the first responders. They're trained to assess situations, to get control of situations, to bring safety to situations that are out of control. And that is their training. Police officers are of different quality, like anybody else. They bring different values and prejudices and attitudes to their job. But the police officer who shows up in a situation should not make the final decision about what happens to the people involved in that situation. And the vast majority of the time now, whatever the police bring in gets prosecuted. The job of the county attorney, one of the important jobs of the county attorney, is to look at an overall sense of justice, not just the assessment and decision that the police officer makes when they show up, but what reflects the overall values of the community. Let me read a couple of things real quick here. This is from the Iowa County Attorneys Association Prosecutorial Standards. First line. County attorney is the chief law enforcement official of the county. The county attorney is responsible for the direction and control of the prosecutorial function in his or her jurisdiction. The primary responsibility of the prosecutor is to seek and obtain justice. And any listing of standards for prosecutors will say things like this, that the first goal is not to maximize convictions, it's not to back up the police, it's to maximize justice. And because of that, prosecutors have a lot of discretion. Right? Any honest prosecutor would say there's no way you can actually prosecute criminally every violation of the law. That would be impractical. For example, the marijuana issue has gotten a lot of attention here. Realistically, if you arrested everybody today, at this very moment, who is guilty of possession of marijuana or paraphernalia in Johnson County, you'd be arresting probably upwards of 15,000 people. And no one would stand for that. So then the decision is, how do you use limited resources to maximize justice? Standard 2.2 of the County Attorneys Association of Iowa says this: the prosecutor should utilize his or her discretion in screening to eliminate those cases from the criminal justice system in which prosecution is not justified. And then it lists factors to be considered. Here are a few of them. Undue hardship caused to the accused. Right? So the punishment is disproportionate to the offense. Excessive cost of prosecution in relation to the seriousness of the offense. Whether the prosecution has a deterrent value. The expressed wish of the victim not to prosecute, and possible improper motives of the complainant. who in a lot of these cases, especially in victimless cases, is the police officer. Unfortunately, police officers don't answer to the county attorney. They answer to their individual police departments. We have various jurisdictions within the county. Cases get brought in here which have to do with victimless offenses that most people would say, this is not really a big deal. Johnson County has some of the worst statistics around when it comes to racial disparity. The state of Iowa has some of the worst statistics, and Johnson County is very much a part of that. State of Iowa has the highest racial disparity between blacks and whites of incarceration in the country. State of Iowa has the highest arrest rate for racial disparity arrest rate in marijuana in the country. So you're 8 times more likely in Johnson County, for example, to be arrested for pot if you're black than if you're white, even though surveys show that black and white people smoke at the same rate. It's not because, so why do 8 times as many black people get arrested? Because you're 8 times as likely to be stopped and searched if you're black. Part of the job of the prosecutor, of the county attorney's office, is to step back, look at these overall justice issues, and use the things the police bring in to work at that overall goal.
Okay. Now you kind of took some of the steam from my question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. As the Johnson County Attorney, what considerations would, or do you, for Janet, what would you put into play when deciding whether to prosecute drug cases? I would also say prosecute cases in general. And John, you get to start this one. We'll go back and forth.
In cases in general, I think an important question is, would a reasonable person think this is something that belongs in the criminal justice system? The ability to prosecute something doesn't mean it should be in the system. Historically in this country we had grand juries, and the way the system was supposed to work, even though it didn't work too well, is that you had private citizens who, any case a prosecutor wanted to bring, the prosecutor had to bring the evidence to this committee of private citizens and get them to agree that there should be criminal charges. And so it was a check, not just the prosecutor checking the police, but the citizens checking the prosecutor. Unfortunately, that system didn't work very well. Prosecutors were able to get grand juries to convict, or to indict, to charge anybody, more or less. And in Iowa, the use of grand juries is optional. So they tend to be used only for controversial cases. In most cases, the decision on whether to prosecute something is made entirely in the prosecutor's office, which puts the burden then on the prosecutor to take that role that historically the citizens had. And you still have to have a citizen grand jury for federal cases, but not for state cases, to screen cases based on, is this the sort of thing that we as a community think should be in the system? So that is, I think, the biggest question, is trying to have that mindset of, is this an important thing to have in the criminal justice system when you look, or can it be dealt with in an alternative way? Or is this the sort of thing that resulted from a cop having a bad day or making a bad judgment and shouldn't be in the system at all? So I think that is an important part of the county attorney, who is kind of the head of a law firm, which is the county attorney's office, and sets the policies that guide those screening decisions by the county prosecutors.
Janet?
Yes. How we decide on how to prosecute any case is to initially look at the facts. Do those facts fit the law of the state of Iowa? And is it something that should be prosecuted? I think you actually heard John read the standards for what the county attorney should look at, and that's basically what we follow, is looking at, do we have the facts? Is this something we should prosecute? And is there sufficient evidence here to go forward with it? There actually is a check when we file charges, which any charge we file has to be approved by the judge too. So the judge is also going to be reviewing to make sure that there is sufficient evidence to go forward with this charge. We try to be cognizant of what's going on with the defendants, as well as what's happening if there are victims in the case, and certainly do listen to the victim's wishes at times as well. We have actually had a lot of discussion within our office, and for a while I had one attorney who was assigned just to be the person who was there, and I requested law enforcement come to our office and have either that individual attorney or other assistant county attorneys in my office review all of the more serious charges so we could make sure that this was the charge we wanted prior to bringing it. We do that now and have somebody on call on a daily basis as well as at night. So we have somebody on call from my office 24 hours a day to answer questions from law enforcement, to review cases, and make charging decisions. And that's how I think it should be done, is that we are working in conjunction with the police. We do actually at times, which may be surprising to some, tell the police, no, do not bring that charge. We get them to change what the charge is. We alter it in some way, and we work consistently with the police. And if they bring some charge that we do not believe is supported by the facts or shouldn't be brought, we don't do that. So we use a lot of the discretion that we have in trying to make sure that we are following the guidelines as a prosecutor to make sure that we are doing justice. Regarding the prosecution of drug cases, we follow something similar in terms of looking how serious it is, but what I've done is also try to look at what are the needs in the community, which is why I helped start and organize the Drug Treatment Court as well as the Marijuana Diversion Program, work with Jail Alternatives Program and our Jail Alternatives team to try to figure out how we are handling cases is the best way to do it. Sorry, my time is up.
All right, I think we'll start with Janet this time. How would you use your discretion as county attorney in interaction with police and prosecutors and judges?
How I use my discretion is much what I was just talking about, is that I meet with the police, I meet with the police chiefs on a regular basis to talk to them about what are the needs in the community, what are the policies and procedures I think that they should be looking at, if there's problems that I'm seeing with law enforcement so we can discuss those. At the same time, they can give me feedback if there's problems within the county attorney's office that they're seeing. I talk to the judges about what's happening and what kinds of things that they're seeing. There's some problems in the whole criminal justice system to try to make changes as needed. I work also extensively with our staff so that we are working with people in the community. One of the big things that I've been working on is a lot of coalition work so that we can try to make sure that we are really working with a variety of entities that deal with the criminal justice system. Hence, we work with people who work in mental health and developmental disabilities areas. We work with people in substance abuse areas. We try to make sure that we're addressing a lot of the needs of the community and trying to make sure that we're developing programs that are going to be helpful in the community. So we work with a variety of different groups to try to make sure that we are doing things. Some of the policies that we set within the county attorney's office may be looking at how we individually might treat a particular case, making sure we're consistent in terms of sentencing recommendations, plea offers, and things like that. And we try to find out what is the best practice, what's going on throughout the rest of the country or throughout the rest of the state in terms of how we are doing things. So we try to make sure that we are educated, that we are responsive to the community, and that we're providing the programs that are going to be best able to help our community. Working with the U of I Anti-Violence Coalition I mentioned before was really helpful because I actually got somebody from the university to help rewrite the guidelines that all law enforcement uses for investigating sexual assault cases, so that they are actually trained in terms of what are the opportunities for a victim in a sexual assault case to go to the university to have different things addressed. So those are all the kinds of things that we deal with in my office to try to deal with discretion, to try to deal with charging decisions, to try to make sure that we are responsive to the community.
John?
So we are a democracy in this country, and the police work for us, right? And so they are not really an independent institution. They are meant to serve and protect the population. And so as county attorney, part of how I would see my job as a directly elected official is to represent the views of the population as a whole to this institution, which can have its own culture and mindset. That will include things like screening every case carefully. And specifically, as you may have heard, I'm committed to end prosecution of a couple of the petty victimless crimes that pull a lot of people into the system, hurt a lot of people, give a lot of criminal records to folks, and without really accomplishing anything positive as far as public safety, particularly marijuana possession for personal use and public intoxication. And so one thing I would do is explain to the police what the policy is. Now, the county attorney can't stop the police from arresting someone, but they can throw the case out. Ken Thompson is the new district attorney in Brooklyn, New York. He was elected last year on a platform very similar to mine, with for very similar reasons, because of racial disparity issues, because of a concern of over-aggressive policing in the population. So if you read the news in the last couple of weeks, he has issued his memo to the New York City Police Department saying, look, we can't stop you from arresting for small amounts of marijuana, but if you do, we will dismiss the case immediately. And the police they're not used to a district attorney doing that to them, but just to say that my approach on this issue and also on public intox are not reinventions of the wheel, right? Brooklyn, New York is a lot bigger than Johnson County, and they're already implementing these policies there for the same reason, seeing that they're causing more damage to people than any positive effect they're having in the community. So they're having a negative effect as far as justice goes.
Okay. We'll switch gears a little bit here. I'm not sure that either of you can answer this in 2 minutes, but we'll give it a try. Describe your experience in, one, preparing and managing an office budget, includes the size of the budget, and secondly, please include the number of staff you have supervised and for how long. And John, you get to start with that one.
Well, that's a loaded question. I think this shows the importance of screening, right? So when things are screened through, that affects the outcome. So obviously, I mean, as probably most people know, before coming to law school, I was a Mennonite pastor of small churches, a church in Colorado and a church down in Mount Pleasant, Iowa. And in those roles, you know, I kind of did everything, right? These are small congregations. I mean, not the financial stuff. I mean, there were lay people in those kind of roles. But I was the preacher. I taught classes. I was the youth leader, taking teenagers on trips, you know, and the counselor in emergencies. You know, we didn't have a staff. It was me. And so, you know, that was the role that I've had. So I will say this. One thing that I will bring to this position of county attorney is a whole life studying issues of social justice and ethics. I just went through law school recently, and one thing I discovered in law school is it can be pretty legalistic in a bad sense. There's not a lot of discussion about what the law should be. It's what the law is and how to apply it to facts of particular cases. And so I think a danger of someone who spent their whole life as a prosecutor is that the question that is brought tends to be, can we get a conviction? In this case, are the facts here to get a conviction? And without particularly a background in stepping back and asking the broader questions about justice. And so everybody brings their own history to a position. That's what I'll bring to this position. And as County Attorney Linus had said, it's an office there are 13 other attorneys, lots of other staff. It's not like the county attorney themselves does everything, which will be welcome given my past jobs. But it's a position in which policy can be set to be implemented by talented staff.
Thank you. Janet?
Well, I've been preparing and managing a budget for several years now as county attorney. Before that, as an assistant county attorney or first assistant, I also worked on helping some with the budget there as well. I've been managing and supervising people since I started in the county attorney's office, supervising interns. I've trained the prosecuting interns that prosecuted and worked in other county attorney's offices across the state really since shortly after joining the county attorney's office. So had to deal even as an assistant county attorney with hiring and firing decisions, and I was involved in a lot of that as an assistant county attorney too. I think I was involved in hiring of all of our current attorneys, even if most of our current assistant county attorneys, if they've been hired since I started as an assistant county attorney. Managing the staff is always one of the challenging things, and I'd say not only within an office of 35, but also because I deal with the employment issues throughout the county, I also help work with other department heads in terms of managing their budget as well as dealing with the employment issues that they have. So I've had quite a bit of experience. As I mentioned, there's 4 different budgets the county attorney oversees: the county attorney's budget, which deals with kind of running the county attorney's office, which is, you know, salaries, training, benefits, all of that. as well as the court services budget that deals with all the expenses for really running the court system. So it deals with everything from paying court-appointed attorneys for guardianships and reviewing that, keeping track of that, dealing with, purchasing different equipment for the courtroom,